Sonntag, Tiferes hat B'Tiferes, Beis Iyar, Tovshin Pei, Parshas, Achrei Mois, Kedoshim. So I was asked to give a shir on a Psak Hangocha from the Baal Yed Mangedes, the Rebbe Maharsh, a shir in Hangocha. So I'll try to discuss it in the Gabe, a certain Psak Hangocha and a Tshuva that he wrote. It's not going to be a in-depth shir that could take hours and hours to really to go in the Inyanim. So instead, I'm going to give a short kitzer of was letzich in the Tshuva. A short kitzer. It's the talking side that I get at tip. Just to misakim zayin la inyan was begeschrieben na Hangocha. I had in mind hopefully that there would be a video share. Unfortunately I can only make a recording. Is given the Ratten Abeide, as is only b'machshavas is barich, and kachang v'zeu. Kaidem call, before I go weiter, I must mention, call Emer Davar Shemevle, Emre Mevgung Engam. I must thank my good Chaver, and Shmuly Super. Without him, I would never be able to put this shit together. When the whole Brackle story came out a few years ago, we had good in-depth discussions, and now he really, really refreshed my memory and Kama Nekudis, and I must thank him for the shir. Not happy without him. But it's not, I don't know if it's called the shir because not really in-depth shir, angakshir, but even angakshir is some angakshir. Okay, fine. So this is a tshuva that was written to Reb Tzvi Hirsch Tamarkin and his son, Reb Yeung Meir Tamarkin. Reb Tzvi Hirsch Tamarkin was at the time in Dubrovna. Later on, a few years later, when his brother passed away, brother of Yosef Tamarkin passed away, so later on he went over, his brother was the Rav in Kremenchuk, so he went over, took the Rav in Kremenchuk. The Tamarkin family is a very chashuva, family in Lubavitch. She had a brother, Don Tamarkin, who defended strongly the Rebbe Maharsh with back and forth with the Koppus, the Rebbe Zalman, Gabe, the inning of Isis, the Shimon, and Nogaba, Tzimtzim. It's a chashuv mishpachet. The brother, Rebbe Yosef Tamarkin, had a famous son-in-law who was also a Rav afterwards at Kremenchuk. Actually, a little later, he was Rebbe Yael Yitzchak, I forgot the full name, Rafanovich, who was a Rav in Kremenchuk. It's a famous family. Many descendants of Lubavitch today, not from the name Tamarkin, but there was a Rav in Kharkov, his name was Aaron Tamarkin. He had many kids, daughters. He had 4 daughters who married Lubavitch and Mishpachas, so Yehuda Chitrik and the Makarevich and Andre, the brother of Falkan, Bechol Yehuda Ayanleib and Shlem Shemenovich. So anyways, so he was a big Talmid Chacham, and he and his brothers have tshuvas that were found in University of Los Angeles. They're still in Ksav Yad. Be'emes, it would be a good in a pigeon shvun to print this for him. Anyway, so this tshuva is found in these Ksav Yad over there, meaning they had tshuvas, and this tshuva, he obviously wrote a letter to Rebbe Maharsh, and Rebbe Maharsh responded. In the same bichon over there, it would have been min haroy to print the letter he wrote to Rebbe Maharsh. I mean, if you found the tshuva of the Rebbe Maharsh there, probably you find his letter there, because, as we'll see, it's easier to sometimes understand wegen was if you have the original tshuva. So the original letter. So the shad we don't have it, but that is what it is. So we'll have to work with what we have. We'll try to piece this thing together. Now that's been the that. Now we have to figure out wegen was in the tshuva. At the time this was printed, it seemed like there's not too much others here, but at the beginning it seems like bedavar hatanagim magdelim and kibalti v'hine, it says tanagim magdelim, and in the Eirech calls it, he assumes it's talking about turkeys that were brought from America, and only later on in that time of the Rebbe Maharsh was a whole machlokes about it, and the Hidden Tzedek, and B'meila he's writing a whole tshuva about it. It's very, very problematic to say it's talking about turkeys, and it's not about turkeys. It's about something called kachin chickens, and I'm going to explain in a second what these kachin chickens are. I'm going to explain what they are, and then I'm going to prove that we're talking about the kachin chicken. It's called from the tshuva. It's not about turkeys, it's about kachin chickens. Turkeys are not from Turkey, and there's a madnazach that many tshuvas, they think that it came from India, because what happened is many countries, okay, let's start over again. In the end of year Rishon Nundal, Rishon Beis, they came and they found America. They found the Caribbean. They found the American hemispheres, the southern hemisphere, the South America, North America. They found new plants, new food, new animals, and it was a whole new world. And they brought it in. These people who went to these countries, to develop them, they were originally trying to get to India. They thought they're going to go around the world and they're going to find India. In the way, they found these countries. So, and you should just know that the Caribbean sometimes there were countries that from Europe that controlled these countries. These countries were called West Indies companies, East Indies companies. West Indies companies was talking about these Caribbeans were other places that were developed within what's called now today America, or East Indies was in India, because they would go to these places and mine the place for spices, for plants, for sugar, for whatever it is, and they would bring it over to Europe. And they were called the Dutch East Indies Company, which was mainly in the Indian area, and then the West Indies Company, So anyways, being it as it may, the people in Europe, who were in Eastern Europe, or these places, they got confused. They see things coming in from these places. They hear these Indies companies, they think it's coming from India. But it's a corpus from India, B'chal. So they thought that these chickens come from India, and it's a problem. We'll see in a second what's the mistake. Turkeys don't come from India, and the other stuff, they don't come from India. They come from, actually, turkeys originally from Mexico. Why was it called Turkey? Basically, it could be Turkish merchants sold it. I don't know. It went from there, it went through England, and from England it went through the whole America, the whole Europe. So that's what the turkeys. Turkeys come originally from Mexico and Bechal from America. There is something called Kachin chickens. Now, Kachin is actually a place in Kachin is actually a place in India, by the way, but Kachin is a place in the southwest coast of India. But Kachin chickens are not from India either. Kachin chickens are actually from China. China at a certain time was there, where they had in their country, they didn't allow trade with other countries. In a certain period of time, around 200 years ago, the Americans came and forced China to open up the doors and to have trade. So then you started having these chickens that were coming in from China, they were coming to Europe and North America. It started actually coming in the Taf Reish Yuds, and they were called Kachin Chinas, Shanghai birds. Now these birds were different than a lot of the birds that they had till that time, and were very different. And B'meila Shaila started arising. Now Derech Agav, today's chickens are a new type of breed, which are be'emes elikach of this Kachin chicken. It's an interbreed of kama chickens together from Ong, Avun, Av Echad, Kungani. There's one big chicken, in the time of the Mishnayos, the jungle fowl, I think it's called. But this is this Kachin chicken that was coming at the time. Now we have a Pse'elikol from a new interbreed, where different scientists around the Tufs and Yud tried putting things together to put together, based on other things, putting together this Bechungu, and they come with this thing. So at that time, there's a whole Shaila, because it was a new chicken and Shailas. So first, it came through England, and it was called, in many tshuvas, you have the English Hon, the American Hon, something called Indica Hon, and there's 20 different names. And I have to mention that in that time, people started asking shaylas again on the turkey, because I forgot to mention, when the turkey came from America to Europe, at first it was makul by everybody. There aren't too many truths about it, but the fact is, it was makul, Fine, gewaldig. But there were no signs about it. Later on, with a new type of thing, there was also an African guinea fowl. It's not really a bird. It's not really a chicken. These things started coming in from all these places. So then they had to flag new signs. So they flag new signs. Flag shine after Turkey. So and there are many different names in the Chuvas. But this was called the English Shahan because it originally came into Europe through England, who brought it in from China, and there was something called Americanahan and other types of names. There are many different names given in the Chuvas, and we have to figure out. I am convinced that, I'm not just convinced, it's possible that this is talking about these Kachin chickens and not the turkeys. I'll explain in a second. The first main raya is, we're going to see in the Hemshech of the Tshuva from the Rebbe Maharsh, that the Rebbe Maharsh discusses interbreeding from a regular chicken that had tilden in that area, with the Kachin chickens. And discusses and brings the ayah from that at a certain point, which we'll get to in the Tshuva. Now, turkeys do not interbreed with turkeys do not interbreed. They don't mate with regular chickens. It doesn't happen. If you push it, it could be against the technique to do it. You know, it's not mashma because it's mashma from the tshuva of the Rebbe Maharsh that's done freely. So it's nish mashma. Another zach is that later on in the tshuva discusses that these Tarnagoyim, they break their own eggs. The eggs are too small for the weight of these chickens, and b'meila they need to use the regular eggs of regular chickens. I'm sorry, but we don't find azam and maisa with turkeys. We only find azam and maisa with Kachin chickens. We do find now it's not such an issue. We don't have Kachin chickens today, anyways. But today it's not such an issue because it could be how we fed them. We feed them today. It could be because of more inbreeds and more changing. But at that time, 100 and something years ago, there were this big discussions about these eggs being cracked. But we never find the discussion of the turkeys. So it's Pasha. It's not about that. So that's been a gear that now. Nachazach. There's one more Nakuda. This other Kuda is extra credit. It's a brown. It's it's an icing in the cake. It's a very good point, but it's icing in the cake. So the mice is a chazay. As we mentioned, these chickens were newer type of chickens. They look different. They look bigger. And there was a lot of shyness that was going on right away. You know. It wasn't a regular Messiah, so we're going to discuss the Musik of Messiah. So they started having tshuvas about it. Now again, it's very hard. There are 20 different names in the tshuvas. The only way to know is not to read the name, but to read how they describe these things. Then you can figure out what we're talking about. Because they said, again, regular turkey, what we talk about, started from Mexico. Anyways, so let's discuss one tshuva. There's a Sefer Yehuda Yanga from the Maria Sad. He discusses about 160 years ago or something like that. He discusses what he calls take. Either he calls it Kachin chicken. I think he calls it Kashin China, which were these places from China, and the name Kachin came together, which what's it called? I'll discuss in a second. It's not even Kachin. It's a mistake. You see how all these things change. India. It's not even India. We'll get to that in a second, which place it really is. But it was put together. Why was it what's it called? Because over there also, because in Eastern Europe, they were getting their chickens through England, so they called it the English things. So what's it called? You should just want to point out in the Sefer Nachum Eshkong. In other places, they keep on calling it. He writes over there these chickens. He says that Tarnagim Shekarim Indisha Hiner that came from India to England and there to Ashkenaz. Okay, it's a mistake. It didn't come from India. That's a mistake. He thought 300 years it came from India, but it was coming through England so that's why it was called English Shahan. So, anyways, back to our discussion over here. I went off topic. So the Maria Sad, he writes, what's it called? He's writing a tshuva somebody named Rebbe Adler. Rebbe Adler had a great uncle who was the Rebbe Chassam Sefer, but he wasn't named after him. He was a Rav in Hamburg, and later on one of the chief rabbis in England. And he wrote a tshuva to someone in the year around Tafresh Chaf, and he writes, the tshuva, the Mari Asad Yehuda Yange is quoting the tshuva, and he says, and this you ask, what's the din of these English hinner? So the tshuva says over there, it's which he's probably talking about Koshen China. That's what he says, which was a mo over there, and now it's coming over here. So he's quoting the tshuva over there, and in the tshuva he's discussing. You asked me this question, and I answered you that I have a Messiah in England. We have already a Messiah for many years. It's just like our Tanagim, but just a little bigger. What we see over here is that we see in the tshuva is that that he's bringing what's called he's bringing a Messiah from England. What's it called? He's bringing clearly a Maisa with the Messiah from England. Now, we have nowhere that it says it's a Messiah from England in regards to the turkeys. There is a Messiah, and that's discussed over here. A Messiah from England, and he's saying it's a Messiah from England, so it makes sense with the English hinner. It's a shad, because the whole thing, as we're going to see soon, is written in hints, and we should discuss this. I'm going to discuss this later again. And some of it's hinting to things that were written to him by the Rav Tomarkin. Had we had the original tshuva of Rav Tomarkin, it would have been, it would have been all clear, many things. What I just want to point out is that Bechal, catch in China, is actually part of Vietnam. The word catch in China. So I think that even the fact that these chickens came from, the Kachin chickens came from China, but it was called Kachin, in the Tshuva he's calling it Kachin China. That's also a mistake, because that would go to Vietnam and not to China. Anyways, that's in regards to that. I just want to point out, since we're talking about Mercedes, so as I said, that since many people thought it came from India, I forgot to mention, so they thought that in the Indian Yiddish Kiyunga had a Masada, and it says in Shulchan Aruch, if one Kiyunga has a Masada, so then it can help possibly it can help for another Kiyunga. I don't know what punkt that would mean, the Indian Kiyunga, because I don't know what it means, punkt they have a Masada. That's not so called punkt, especially if which Yidden lived in the 300 years ago. So I don't understand why the Pasuk Bechal brought down India Messiah, but Bechal, we know that it wasn't from India, it came from Mexico. Okay, so now let's get to the Guf Ashayna. So we have to. So he's asking him about these chickens, and he's asking him what he thinks. It seems to be that he suggested certain ideas how to be mated it, and the Rebbe Maharsh accepts these reasons, plus he adds some more reasons. So I'm basically going to go over what these reasons are, and that will be the whole thing. But before that, we have to make a slight little hagdama. Bechal, there's something called a Muscovy duck. Now, as we mentioned, this turkey never really had a controversy, but the thing called the Muscovy duck did have a controversy. The Muscovy duck is also from the new countries, and mostly, it was mostly then it was known, and originally people didn't see it, but then when Frumme Yidden started looking into it, it raised a tremendous controversy. And some of the discussions in the Muscovy doc we see in general in the other discussions, and we'll bring one of it up soon over here. But I'm just saying, it's interesting that Turkey never had this ganze Meise, but on the other hand, the Muscovy doc had a mamash ganze Meise, and a whole machoikis, and it seems like it's al derech. This other chicken had this whole machoikis. There was also geese, certain types of geese that had certain machoikis, and we'll discuss one of the svaris that applies to these geese and these ducks will also apply to our case over here, to these cats and chickens. A very similar svara that comes together. So we have to have a sagdama. B'chang, it's the questions regarding the kashrus of previously unknown species of birds are much more challenging than regular other things. And some we're not sure. We're not sure because it's a little different and more complex than animals and fish. The Torah in Shmini and later on say that Dvarim, you have certain, specifications how to identify and indicate which animal is kosher. Yeah, mangagera, mafresas parsa, snapper for kaskasas, for fish, and these things, you see, birds, it doesn't say that. Birds, the Torah just says, you have 24 minim, which are not kosher, and it's mashma that everything else is kosher. Now, the Maisa is initially say Pashat B'chang. The Gemara, there's interbreeding of many of these minim. These minim, the Gemara identifies 100 different minim for one min. It's not so clear B'chang. So, the Gemara says that basically, in order for a bird to be kosher, it has to have, first of all, it cannot be doitis, it cannot be a predator, as we'll explain in a second, and it has to have three things. An extra toe, a zefek, which means a crop, and it has to have the heilige kolkeven, the pupik, which the inner lining can be peeled. What's this ma'aseh with this extra toe? So it's a mechaikis, a poskim, how to define the extra toe, a mechaikis, Rashi Taisvis. Then you have this ma'aseh with the crop. The crop, basically, crop is like it's the area right under the throat before it goes to the stomach where it stores the food. Usually, the kosher animals have them. By oifis that are birds of prey, it's just a widened area in the esophagus, but they don't have that area where it stores the thing. So that would be a second indication. And the third indication is what we call this peelabong kolkeven, gizzard. Okay, birds don't have teeth, and how are they supposed to chew their food? So they only process it in the stomach. So one of the stomachs is the thing that actually does the chewing and everything, and that's the gizzard. And the muscular outside layer can easily be peeled away from the interior sac that contains the food. And this is different than predators, birds of prey, and other things they eat, meat and fish, and there, in such a case, the gizzard has a thin wall that serves to store the food rather as mechanical digestion, and there's no outer muscular layer to be peeled away. So this is another nukodah. So here's the shaila. If you have these three nukodahs, do you need, and then it cannot be a deitis, it cannot be a predator. Here, what is a deitis b'chang? What is a deitis? Is it something that takes its claws and puts it on another behema? Is it something that puts its weight on another behema, eats it live? It's a mechaikis rishonim. I'm not going to get involved. It's just a predator. Bechal did a tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek Barichas Gadol in Yeridei Simen Samach, where he gets involved by Barichas and explains Mamash Mesadid all the shittas, the 4 shittas Waladeris, the many shittas Waladeris, the many shittas of the current shayla, all these shaylas when they get birds. See that tshuva in the Tzemach Tzedek in Simen Samach. So, anyways, the shayla is, and this discussed in the tshuva, doesn't need, if you have these 3 simanim, do you need to know for a fact that it's not a datus, or is it enough? Is it enough to say that it has these 3 simanim? It's genug. So the Ma'aser Shitas Rashi says, no, you need to know it's a datus. You need to know for it's a fact it's a datus. And if you don't know for a fact it's a datus, so then it's not genug. You have to have 3 simanim plus to know it's a fact it's a datus. That's Shitas Rashi. Other Shitas and Yeshedim say different things, but this is Shitas Rashi, which is angenommen in Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. But the Ramah learns into Rashi, and this is the way we understand, and the Tzemach Tzedek is very clear about it, emphatic about it. And this is something that we have to point out next, is that this thing that, because we don't know what's a datus and what's not a datus, you cannot have any bird that's considered kosher unless you have a Maseda. And the Ramah is very clear about it, very sharp about it. He writes in Darkei Moshe about it already. It seems like this is what Mechaber says, but the Ramah is more stringent about it. This is a very, very important thing that has to be brought out. And Rashi already learned this in the Gemara Chulin in Daf Samach Beis. There was a Ma'aser with Tarnegung Gulta, the Agma, where people were eating a treifa bird, a non-kosher bird, because they were applying the physical characteristics, and then it turned out it was a mistake. So that's where against the Ma'aser Fangsachon, and what you call it, we're going to have to discuss this a bit. So, how does the Vihestis, the Rebbe Maharsh, deal with this? Because it's brought up in our discussion here. Yeah. So we say we have to have a Maseda. It's very complicated. The ganze Ma'aser is all complicated. And throughout the days there was so much machlokes, and the Minchas Chinuch writes in regards to explaining the full identification of kosher or eifos. He writes you have to write a chibur on its own, and many poskim did that. The Chassam Sofer writes in a tshuva, after he writes several pages of explanation on the subject, he writes that be'emes, the rest of his thoughts on this topic is in a separate piece. The beginning of Eibshitz wrote a ganze Sefer Pnei Nesher. The Beis Yitzchak writes that he refers to 3 different quintresim he wrote on this matter because it's a ganze Ma'aser. And that's one of the reasons, with all these complications, but this makes it even more complicated when we do it, is you can only do something that has a Maseda. Now the emes is that many poskim, like as we said, the Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz in the Sefer, this is in Kresi Plesi, Achs on the Ramah, of the Ramah, but as I said, first of all, there are many poskim that are maskim, and the Shalmei reflect of the Ramah, but the Machalik is a poskim, but the Tzemach Tzedek is very strong that we follow Rashi, we follow the Ramah, and very, very strong about it. So here's the story. So you have this tshuva over here, you have the shayla. So in fact, this is in the 6th Igris in Igris Kodesh from the Rebbe Maharsh. He says that this hon, we have this chicken in. To be exact, there was the Opium Wars in 1839 when the British forced China to open its ports to foreign merchants. And then you had in the 1840s, first trading ships were reaching Europe with these unusual birds. They're not sure what to do with it. They look similar to chickens, but they were much larger, and their legs were feathered. And there were many other differences. They weren't sure what to do about it. And it took them time. So he has the mice is here's one of the differences. One of the differences is that it eats from the Gemara says that that if it chaps something in the ear and eats it, so that it's a simon, it's a datus, it's a problem. So he says over there, he wanted to say it was alright. Well, even though that they grab this thing from the ear, the fact is, oh no, not it's a datus. It's a simon that it's a oif tamea. That's what the Gemara says in Chungen, and it's word of Shulchan Aruch. But here you have 3 simonim in the guf. There's all 3 simonim with the toe, the gizzard, and the crop. And he says also we see they're not datus, so you can't answer it. What do you mean it's not datus? What about the Ramah? We said that Ramah, you need a Masada. So this is a very, very shredder thing. It's not addressed. This is why it's very much mashma that he's quoting it's Tfiya Shemarkin, and this is how important it would be to see the actual tshuva. We could say as but it's very hard to say this. But we'll have to say it. We have no choice. There's a sefer called Arugois Haboisim, not Arugas Haboisim, that people mistake of Greenwald from Chust, but Arugois Haboisim whatever. So he comes up with a chiddush. We wouldn't have heard of it, Stamazay, but it's quoted in the Daika Tshuva. That's how you know a lot of stuff. You find them out from the Daika Tshuva, the other Tshuvas. So he says that this Ramah says you cannot be Seimich of the Samani Tada, and you need Mercedes, so that's when we don't know, we're not sure if it's Datus. But if we see it for many, many years, and we see it all the time, we see that it's not Datus, you don't need a Mercedes B'chal. And then he explains the turkey that way, the turkey which we said, which we have no machaiks about, so he explains how the turkey works, and he wants to apply it to other cases, and it's going to probably apply to this catch and chickens also. It seems like that this is how we'll touch it into the Rebbe Maharsh's tshuva. I mean, we have no other option. It just says Shemi Achar. Maybe we could translate it Shemi Achar Shanaroyim Sheinim Dersim Kein Anu Ngasser Be'oisam. Shemi Achar She'anuroyim. It seems like since you could maybe get touch it that since it's a zay, we see it already for a while, so maybe it's a different word. I don't know. It's a deichik, but that's the only way to do it. Then he goes with another reason, and he comes up with a ma'aser called hybridization. What's the ma'aser hybridization? So the Gemara says in Chodesh Tav Zayin that Yeshua ben Levi said that it's not possible to make a hybrid between a behemoth tamei and tahira. Tahira tamei, you cannot cause conception to come out from behemoth tahira tamei. Chayis behemoth chayis darson. It has to be either tamei or tameim together, but not a tamei tahir. To be 2 tameim or 2 tahirim. Even though we could say it's mashma behemoth chayis, it doesn't discuss eifis. The Torah says by eifis it says ha tamei. Not Tamea, but he thinks it's the same thing, which is interesting. In the Lashon Rambam, in another truth from the Tziv in Chav Beis, he quotes the Lashon Rambam the way in Lashon Rambam it's mashma it's tako oifus, not just chayis name is oifus. So what's the story over here? We see that there are all type of chickens are interbreeding with these chickens. The fact is they're having kids. Muslims zagin, they're not chickens. They have eggs and they lay eggs and they have new chickens. Muslims zagin that at the same min. Then he asks the question. Rashi in Perikam Ezvav Pasuk of Dalet in Parshas Vayishlach. So Rashi brings over there a ganze Meise from Medrash. This Ayah, the person by the name of Ayah, he was a mamzer. He brought mamzerim to the world because he would go and he would take put a donkey and a horse together, and they came out of that a mule, and the kids are able to make interbreeding. So this again, you have to know what's the kasha. I mean, what's the kasha? You have to figure out what the kasha is, and this again, it would be a good thing. It had the tshuva. So he says it's in one case it's 2 behemoths tameis. There's 2 behemoths tameis that could work. Here, if you're saying one is a min behemoth, one is a min a tamei, one's a min tahira, so if you would say then they wouldn't be able to interbreed. And so B'mela, he brings it. So that's the first reason why he brings its mutter. Now this ma'aseh with hybridization is really a machlokes a poskim. There are many poskim that write azay, many poskim that write azay. The Avnei Nezer wants to. The machlokes is true from Avnei Nezer that people translate in many different directions. But it seems from what you call it, the fact is that this is the way the Rebbe Maharsh learns it. That we can prevent the need for Meseda. You don't need Meseda if you have, besides the fact that you see it's not a data, you don't need Meseda when you see that you have hybridization. So that's been again that. Then he discusses a second thing. I'm sorry. He says that, and this is what and this is what we discussed. It cannot be talking about Turkey because you don't have hybridization with Turkey. Then you have the next thing is that it says that you have these birds are very big and they crush the other eggs, and you have to mix them with these eggs. And sorry, that's the next one. The second one is he says they have a Messiah in another country. England already, as we quoted before, the Tshuva from Abdas and Adler. England has a Messiah for a few years. They, for some reason, they checked it in. They had Messiah, so it's all right. So the Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Pei Beis. The Shulchan Aruch says in the end of Siman Pei Beis. Shulchan Aruch says as I in Siv Hey, first of Dal. Mishahu mimakim shenegim iser ba'oif echad. מפני שאין המסיידס, והנח המקום שיש להם מסיידס, יחן אחר במקום שהנח שם, אפילו די תנחזה, ואם יוצא ממקום שיש להם מסיידס, והנח המקום שאין להם מסיידס, מוטרחס. He says, someone is going from a place that they were neg isser in a certain oif. Why? Not because they Messiah that was bad. No. Because they didn't have Messiah. Then he goes to a place that has a Messiah. He can eat from there, even if he's planning on going back. And if he goes from a place that's Messiah that's good, and he goes to a place that's not Messiah, he can eat it also, both directions. What happens if he's going from a place that's nothing? It says, he comes from a place that's empty. He goes to one place, there's no Messiah there, but he knows that another place they have a Messiah. So the Shulchan Aruch says, some people say it's good, some people say it's not good, and the Yesh Achos Divri Eisa. That's what Shulchan Aruch says. However, the Rebbe Maharsh says that if you look in the Shach, there's a mistake over here. Basically, the Shulchan Aruch learned that there's a mechik between the Rashba and the Rosh. Where it seems from the Rosh that the Rosh is a matter. It says that as long as you don't have a Messiah, that it's Asr. So then you could, and you have the other one in some places it has a Messiah, it's mutter, you can rely on it. It seems like the Rashba asks it. But the Shach, and he quotes the Drisha and the Mashang, if you're ma'ayin on Lashon of the Rashba is not saying that if one place has a Messiah, around the place, the other place, no one has anything, you can't eat it. No. It's talking about where there's another place in the world has, that a place where Neig Isser, if you come to a place with Neig and Isser, in another place Neig Heta, you can't base yourself on the place that's Neig Heta, you have to rely on the place that's Neig Isser. So we never had a Messiah that it's Asr, and here we have a place in Messiah it's more. Just you can apply another sniff that it would be all right. What's the third reason? This is very interesting. This takes us to Siman Pei Vav. He says, this is what we said before. You have the Tarnagoyim, they break the other small eggs. Again, we didn't have this problem by turkeys, only by the cotton chickens. So what do? They put they take the eggs of these cotton chickens, and they take the regular chickens to sit in them, to roost. And therefore, in our place, they don't grow the same way. It doesn't breed the same way it breeds in the other countries, because you're doing this kind of thing, putting that chicken over there. So he says, for sure you can't have a problem, because in the end of the day, our chickens that come out end up looking like a regular chicken. Now this is complicated. It's not say pashut, but I'm just going to say, I'll say why it's so pashut in a second. But sagt as I. He says as I. It says in Shulchan Aruch in Sim Pevav Zayin that if you have a chicken hatch, a small egg hatched, and you have another chicken come out, and the egg came from a treifa, even though an egg that comes from a treifa is also the chicken's all right. Then the Rama says, but you shouldn't do chatchila. So what's the shot you shouldn't do chatchila? So he quotes the Yavitz, very interesting. I'll show you this in the Yavitz. But the Yavitz is quoted in the Pesach Tshuva Dartin. It's not that when the Rama says the chatchil, you should be careful. Not you should be careful to eat. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. But not that you shouldn't do chatchil. You shouldn't put it there. But not that it becomes usher. Tevel, a person should not use tevel to grow other types of plants. But if you did use tevel to grow the other plants, so you could eat it from it. There, there's other mefarshim. Let's say there's the poskim. The Taz says that it means that it's he learns it that it's taka aser. Like you have gdunge truma. There's one of the yud ches takanis from Bishamai. They snuck in a whole bunch of takanis to sugi b'fnei atzmi. So one of the takanis was that gedunge truma have a dinner truma. Gedunge truma doesn't have truma, but gedunge truma. What's gedunge truma? You have crops that grow from truma itself, so then it becomes aser. Why does it become aser? So there are two reasons given: Rebbe Chanina and Rava. One of them is because it's going to be stealing money from Gaza from the Kohanim, and the other one is because they're going to keep at the home this truma, because if they have it. People are going to keep them, not going to give it to the Kohen. That's Reb Chanina, they're going to keep it, not going to give it to the Kohen, because they want to make their crops from mitzvah chumum. And that's going to be mutter. The second reason is, no, because people they're going to start having aganse meisim with truma tameya, that you can get your crops out of it, but in the meantime, which will be alright, which will be chumum, but in the meantime, the Kohen will have truma tameya over there, and you might touch it. So, the svar over here is, if you have these eggs that are treif, that it might be hatched, a guy might eat the egg, he might eat it, and b'meila, he might eat it, so we make a takana just like by the truma. The Beishami made a takana. Beishami made a takana that you should not take it because you might because the person might become tummy, might keep the truma tamei in his house. So to hear the eggs might be, the guy might eat the egg. That's the Taz. And he explains it's also to eat it. The Kurz Kesef asks many kasha, so he explains it all differently. The Yavitz explains it differently. He says when we have other cases, you have Arna and not only Arna, Tavo, V'chum, all these things, you're not allowed to use it. But if you use it, it doesn't become asr. So he explains the same thing here. You can't apply that thing, and you see the other cases that it's also to do it. You shouldn't do it, and that's what the Rama means. The Rama means you shouldn't do it. Now he adds another point, and it's actually in the Yavitz, it's derech agav, but the Pesach Tshuva brings it befeidish, so the Rebbe Maharsh brings it. The Bechar, why is it mutter? Because the Gemara Tmula says the Shach brings this down. Also, that's the next step. First of all, so he says that Bechar, what's the problem doing it? What's the problem here by the Beitzah? So he originally compared it to Tevel in the Shalos Yavitz, but he added another point in Derech Agav, and here the Tevel point wasn't brought b'chal. It just, the Pesach Tshuva quoted B'ikah, so he's quoting the Pesach Tshuva, that because it's similar to Mevatel Issa Chatchila. Basically, a guy who's and if you use that sword, it's only for himself, not for somebody else. If you want to say it's also, if a person is about to Issa Chatchil for himself, so someone else could take it, it's mutter for him because no reason. But for him, it's like he's mevatel. What does mevatel Chatchil mean? Mevatel Chatchil means he takes something and puts it in a 16 mevatel b'shishim. What is he doing over here? He's taking something that's really awesome and becomes that. So b'meila we have a problem with that. Now, what's the reason? What does he quotes this that it says in the Gemara in Tumura and Davzayin Amud Aleph that the Gemara says, he's just quoting this thing that this little thing was hatched from a bear it's mutter because it only hatches when the egg already falls apart. So it's a naya mice. It's a new entity. It's not connected to the first entity. When the egg came out, it was still part. It was still developed within the hen, but here it came out. So it's a new entity. So b'meila it is mutter. So that's the mice with the egg. It's like that duh. That is a duh, and this is very strong. We have to understand, but this is what it says in the tshuva, that these eggs look similar to our eggs already. So since it looks similar to our eggs, and then the chickens that come out already look much more similar, so then there should be no problem. The only thing is that the reason over there it's not a different min that comes out. And this is the Shadakite was mit einfach me can all of it, me can verantworten, but it's to zeit. It's the same min. It's not a different min that comes out. Adrabe, the din is in bechayres and sangacha. Yetz min a tayr, but yetz min even a tamei yetz min a tayr is tayr, and a tayr yetz min a tamei is tamei. So it's not the vart. Here it's a different vart. It's the same min. Just one was treif because, if it's the milk that comes out of a treif animal is not treif as nevela. No. Not treif as behema tameya, but it's a behema tahira. But the behema is treif for other reasons. So then this will also be treif. Here it's the vart is that it's a different min coming out. So I don't punct say it's a simple vart. There's part of it in them, but I just wanted to point this out now. Just to mention the point of datus, I just did want to add one could negate datus, a word that you could discuss. This was a pash echet in the tshuva, and it's a motzadik in Simon Samach. So he discusses something called a goose. What's the mice with the goose? The Rebbe Maharsh says that, and this Rebbe Maharsh is quoted. It's quoted all over the place that any bird that has a wide beak and a webbed feet like a goose is not datus. So if you have that with the three other simanim, so we can use according to the Shulchan Aruch to matter unknown species. The mice is nish as a pashit because it's an ish pashit, and this is discussed in all paskim. But the mice is nish as a pashit according to Tzaddik. Tzaddik explains that the MS, and there's a lot of kashas on this thing. I'm not going to get involved with all the kashas, but the Tshuva Tzaddik explains that according to the Rebbe Maharsh, what's a datus? A datus is a bird that hunts and eats other birds, similar to a lion. So a bird, which is, any bird that's similar to a goose, which is physically incapable of being a datus, so it's incapable, so it cannot be a datus. But that's all. This is all explained about Rebbe Maharsh. She tasai. However, according to Rashi, that first of all, Rashi holds, and I didn't want to get involved in the details now, but I'll get involved that the bird holds the food down with its feet. So even with the goose comparison, this was a pashut because it's much more narrower. And Nachazach, Rashi Bechal rejects the whole thing. He says you need a Messiah. So this whole goose comparison is a big problem according to Rashi Bechal. That's the way it comes up from the Tzemach Tzedek. So it's Bechal nicht pashut. Was noch habe ich gewollt sagen? So the Rebbe Maharsh answers says something else, which is very important to know. And you're asking Psakdin, but that wissen hangocha ma'ase. Now it's very uncomfortable to say this, but nach wissen sachmon we have machoikes. Sometimes the machoikes is l'shem shemayim, and sometimes it's habul shem shemayim. Sometimes there's politics involved. Me darf doch wissen politics. And more when man paskin to. Yeah, it's not fun, but darf doch wissen. So that the Rebbe Maharsh says that he says yechon av mizbo, and in our city. They eat it without a pickbook, and the Amolda was Chakira Drisha, and they were Machshirit, and he thinks the reason it's coming because certain Sheikhtim, it seems like, I don't know the Matthias, but the old type of chickens, certain Sheikhtim got a special tax or something like that, they got a little money or something like that. These new type of chickens, they're not getting money off of it. So they're making a ganze Pumus because they want to get money. It's a ganze Meise mit Geld. Aha! So that's the real Ma'aseh. It's all negei b'davar. It's very simple. We had this Ma'aseh a few years ago. I'm comfortable because Rabbi Landau didn't quote this tshuva hin or tzedek. It wasn't Mishachas. But the basis of this tshuva, let's say a few years ago we had the Ma'aseh with the brakel. So first of all, people, they had to invest in the brakel and it costs a lot of money. How are you going to get people to eat it? So you have to say everything's treif. Mamash treif, because or else why would someone pay more money? It doesn't have much meat. Okay. So they have to say it's safe. The other ones take it as the front of their kasha, say everything else is safe. But the truth is, it's a naya maisa. But you see, the first part of the tshuva, the hybridization. The shaila is if you're using all three seifim together, or it's each sniff stands on its own. Do we say that Rebbe Maharsh holds that hybridization is good enough, or you need to have the other three things, and that's how you have to apply to the bracha. But one thing you do see, als du da Geld reingemischt, ist eine andere Parche im Ganzen. The truth is, in the Lamdas I for sure didn't cover it, and even in practical stuff, just like I don't know, Kudus I wanted to bring out, but we'll leave it at